Welcome to the Outsmart Burnout Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Zaria Ruben, a functional medicine doctor, an international speaker, and a burnout badass because I've been there myself. After walking away from my own high-stress medical career, I discovered how to break free from burnout to reclaim my passion, purpose, and joy. And now I'm here to help you do the same. From science-backed tips to time-saving hacks, and hopefully some aha moments that just might change your life. So sit back, relax, and let's do this. Today's guest is on a mission to help smart, sensitive women stop playing small, start speaking up, and step into the most confident, authentic version of themselves. Molly Ruben, and no, I don't think we're related, but maybe we are, we'll find out later, is a confidence and boundaries coach who helps women ditch people-pleasing to create vibrant, unapologetic lives rooted in self-trust. With a background in public health, years of personal growth work, and deep training in feminine power coaching, Molly blends science, soul, and strategy to help her clients build emotional resilience and rock-solid boundaries. If you've ever struggled with saying no, setting limits, or speaking up for what you really want, this conversation is going to hit home for you. And I, for one, cannot wait to get started. So welcome, Molly Ruben, to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here.
I know, it's amazing. We even have matching curly hair. It's very, very funny. I think probably way back somewhere in the history in the old country, maybe we were related. So that's very cool. Yeah.
Very possible.
So I'm really happy to have you on the show. I think this topic is so important. And as we discussed, it's becoming a little bit more salient over time. It's having a bit of a moment, boundaries. And so tell me a little bit more about your story and how you got involved with boundary work. How did this become something that you wanted to focus on?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I didn't know what boundaries were for probably the first 30 years of my life. As you said, people weren't really talking about it. And I just thought my main job in life was to be good. I followed the rules, I did what I was supposed to, and my job was to be good, which meant to keep everyone around me happy and comfortable all the time.
Oh my gosh. I feel like we've already hit some sort of like major aha moment in the first 5 seconds of the podcast. This is so critical for women to hear and to understand. We think that our job is to be good and to make everyone else happy. Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, and society and families and everything has taught us that what makes us good is putting other people before ourselves. And that's a myth that I really try to bust with the women that I work with and people in general. So I thought that that's what made me good, was to keep everyone around me happy and comfortable. And I did all the things I was supposed to. I got my master's and I worked at this prestigious university and I had bought a house. And I remember I had turned 30 years old and I woke up one morning and I'm just lying in bed staring at my beige ceiling, just probably for an hour, just feeling the weight of my body on the mattress and just sitting there thinking, this can't be it. This can't be like what my life is about. Because even though I had, from the outside, it looked really great, I knew I was miserable. I had friends, but I often felt lonely and separate. I walked on eggshells constantly around my family, my friends, my coworkers, anyone I dated. I really, really, really wanted a loving romantic relationship, and that area was just a mess. And I ultimately felt really unfulfilled. And I just knew there was more for me. And I hit a low point. I knew something had to change. And it just became crystal clear that I desperately wanted more for my one fleeting, precious life.
You
And
just
so,
described my entire life at the same juncture in my life as well, in my 30s, when I quote unquote had it all. And I was a physician. I was at a very prestigious university. I was living in New York City. I was quote unquote living the dream.
living the dream.
And was not able to be successful in one area of my life, which was romantic relationships. Every other area I was,
And we know
But I could
boundaries are,
control every other area.
yeah, boundaries are critical. And so there's that balance of I can't control this, but I also need boundaries. So yeah, just as an example, I had a guy that I dated and it was on and off. It was not good, but like I could not tolerate this person being mad at me. So if we had an
Mhm.
argument, there were days that I actually left my office to be on the phone with him for 3 hours, basically beg him to not be mad at me instead of being able to say, okay, you're mad. Great. I'm going to let you deal with that and we'll come back to this later. I could not handle it. So that's like, it was pretty extreme with how much I could not tolerate anyone being mad at me or having those kind of boundaries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think we were in the same relationship, and I think for me, what I couldn't tolerate was the fear of abandonment, and
Absolutely.
so I felt that my antidote to that was to just be so perfect and to be whatever other people wanted me to be, and to just people please all the time, and to, yeah, make sure they were never mad at me because I was always trying to give them exactly what they wanted. And they got bored of that quite quickly. I
Well,
wasn't standing up for myself.
yeah, I mean, one of the aha moments I had after, 5 years on and off with the same person was I've been operating like if I can prove to them why they should be nice to me, then they will. So I spent my time trying to convince them of how good and worthy I am, as opposed to like they're not treating me like a jerk because I haven't convinced them not to. They're treating me like a jerk because they're a jerk. And my job is to walk away, not try to convince them.
Okay,
I
now I'm more and more convinced that we are related.
Yeah, yeah, and I just got to a point where I was like, I'm unwilling to tolerate this anymore, and I had recognized some patterns that not even from my parents, but, back in the generations of families, and I really got clear, this stops with me. This stops with
Yeah.
me, and I don't really know what that looks like, but I'm unwilling to repeat these patterns and have the same kind of relationship that I saw in my parents and, further back generations. And so I really committed and spent those next 8 years just diving into really understanding and unlearning those old habits, like, where they came from, fear of abandonment, things like that, fear of not being liked, fear of not people thinking I wasn't good or worthy, really breaking through my own inner barriers that I had. So, really building on my emotional resilience and my courage and my bravery. And then also realizing that there were skills that I was fundamentally lacking, the skill of boundary setting, which we're so often, I know, especially as perfectionists and people pleasers, we're like, what's wrong with me? I can't set boundaries. And if your parents had never learned to ride a bike and they didn't teach you to ride a bike because they didn't know how, would you think you were some failure? Because as an adult, you didn't know. No, you weren't taught because the people who were supposed to teach you also didn't have that skill. And we could have so much compassion for them and doing the best that they could. But it was this skill set that in my 30s I had to learn. And in that process, really stepped into becoming my most authentic and empowered self and transformed a lot of my life. My relationships are so deep and authentic now. I feel deeply seen and known by the people in my life, and actually being open and receptive to support with the people around me is like incredible. People are so supportive. There's a level of peace and calm that I have in my life that wasn't there before. My relationship with myself, I like myself. I can tolerate my own company for long periods of time, which was not the case before. And there's so much more spaciousness in my life to do the things that nourish me and bring me joy and fulfillment, which is really where my coaching practice came out of. And this journey of creating the rock solid self trust process, which helps women kind of go through this process in a much shorter time than it took me. So hopefully,
Right.
my learnings and experiences can support other people to make this transition faster, because yeah, I really want women to own and reclaim their energy. It takes so much energy to be focused on other people, and almost to a point where we're trying to read minds, predict the future. We think we should know how people are going to react. We think we should know what's going to upset people. And so we spend all this energy being hyper aware and hyper vigilant and taking care of others. And that's exhausting. And I really want women to be able to reclaim their energy in a kind, loving way. Boundaries don't have to be harsh, which is another thing we could talk about. Um, but to really be able to take that energy to put it towards their own well-being, what really fulfills them. I believe we all have a purpose that we were put on this earth for that is so hard to manifest or step into if our energies pull, if we're exhausted and burned out. And there's nothing that brings me more joy than seeing women living their most vibrant, authentic, unapologetic, that's like, talk about power. A woman in her element, aligned with her true purpose, is just on fire and unstoppable and a joy to be around. So that's what I want for
Yes. Oh
everyone.
my gosh, I love this manifesto. There's just my brain is all over the place because I'm making so many connections between things you've said. So one thing that you said is about always worrying about other people and always, that our job is to make sure other people are okay and to make sure that other people are getting their needs met. Well, we learn on the airplane, the first thing we learn is put your own oxygen mask on first. You can't put other people's oxygen masks on first. I mean, that's just not how it works. And yet, it can be very difficult to adopt that mentality when it comes to ourselves, when it comes to our personal life, when it comes to our careers, when it comes to so many aspects of boundary setting and setting priorities. And somehow, as women, we're given this message that other people always come first. And if we do that, if we put other people first, we are quote unquote being good and we'll be rewarded for that. And I think that, I had that mentality as a physician and in my training and throughout that the more self sacrifice I made, the happier I would be.
Yes.
And it turned out to be kind of the opposite.
Yeah, my number one mantra is that self-sacrifice is not required for you to be a good, loving, or lovable person. And that's like, for people, that blows their mind.
Yeah, well, what blew my mind was the book Playing Big by Tara Moore. We can put it in the show notes if folks haven't come across this book. It is fantastic. And it is just basically about empowering women and why do we play small and what is holding us back. And in one of the chapters, she does deconstruct some of the historical context and societal context for why women are people pleasers and why we always feel the need to be liked. It was the only currency we had.
Right.
So we didn't have rights. We didn't have power. We didn't have land. We didn't have money. We couldn't vote. We couldn't do anything. The only thing we could do was get other people to like us. And that was how we wielded influence. And so it's so ingrained in us and it can be so hard to break that habit. And it's so important. So I am really I'm so excited about this and about the work that you do. And I think it's going to be
Thank
really
you.
impactful for our listeners. So let's talk a little bit about what is a boundary? Because I think that it's like a word that we use all the
Yes.
time and we might not actually know what the definition is.
So I love this question. And I think there are lots of different kinds of boundaries. There are physical boundaries, emotional boundaries, all of that. I really deal with kind of interpersonal boundaries. And when I'm talking in a conversation like this about boundaries, it's usually something simple about, saying no is the simplest version of a boundary. So I love this question because so much of what's out there in terms of definitions of boundaries, it's like, it's, the things you do to respect yourself. Or my favorite is, where people say boundaries are where you end and the other person begins. And as someone who doesn't know boundaries, it's like, okay, that's a nice thought experiment, but what does that mean? How
Yeah,
does that help me?
it's too
So
abstract and
it's
wishy
too,
washy. Yeah.
exactly, it's too abstract. So the way that I relate to boundaries, and there's a second piece of this, but it's at the simplest form, a boundary is beyond this point, I'm uncomfortable. Beyond
Mm,
this point, I'm uncomfortable. The issue with that for many women is you can't figure out where you're uncomfortable in your mind. How do we know we're uncomfortable? You feel it in your body. Imagine you're out somewhere in public sitting on a bench and a stranger sits way too close to you. You immediately feel this leaning back in your body. Your discomfort is in your body. But for most women, we're totally disconnected from that because either one, when you're a small child and you have these kind of uncomfortable feelings, they're big feelings. And if you don't have someone to help you process them and understand them, you just start to avoid them. It's too big, it's too uncomfortable. I don't want to deal with that because discomfort's not pleasant. The other piece that I think a lot of us can relate to is we've been taught to override those body signals, even just from a young age of, make sure you give your creepy aunt whatever a hug and you don't want to, but you have to. So
Yeah.
you learn to override and eventually ignore those signals. So part of the boundary work is we have to bring back, we have to make it safe. That's a big thing. We have to make it safe to turn towards and really turn inward into the discomfort that we feel to be able to recognize our boundaries. And sometimes that that feeling can also come out as anger. A lot of us suppress anger because we've only seen anger used as a weapon against people. We haven't seen healthy anger. And so, one of the clients I had, when I was talking to her at the end of working together, she said, well, I used to be really ashamed of my anger. I used to suppress it and avoid it. And she said, now I know that an anger is really an indication that a boundary's been violated. And I'm able to use it as a guide rather than something to suppress or be ashamed of.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to reconnect to the feelings in our body of beyond this point, there's discomfort, I'm uncomfortable, to be able to communicate that about that to other people.
Okay, this is so important. And this is what I teach as well, is that we have become so disconnected, the mind body connection. So we have become so disconnected from paying attention to the signals and the messages that our body's sending us. And I call it the check engine light, when it comes to burnout, especially that we see the check engine light and we just keep driving and there's no
Until it's
gas or the
flashing and
engine's falling out.
beeping
Yeah, it's
and
flashing. There's an alarm going off. And you're like, everything's fine. This is fine. And we keep going. And I think that it's a little bit different when it comes to boundary, but it's a similar concept that there is a physical signal that you get and you start to recognize it, whatever it is for you. For me, it's like I get this tightness in my throat and my stomach and this feeling of like, I don't like this. This is not okay. And we override it. We convince ourselves that it is okay, that, well, it's fine, or, well, you just have to do it. Well, this person is really toxic, but we're going to keep them around.
yeah.
And I think we really do have to help ourselves pay attention to those warning signals and lean into that rather than try to suppress it and try to talk ourselves out of it, which is what we often do.
Yeah, my experience of that, I'll get a tightness in my chest, and then it's almost like I bump on something, like something doesn't feel right. And I'm like, wait a minute. But I think when we start out, it's hard to sometimes identify, but I think the most powerful two words that a recovering people pleaser can say is, I'm uncomfortable. Because then we also worry, well, if I'm uncomfortable, what if I make this other person uncomfortable? And that's when you talk about sacrifice, we'll often sacrifice our own comfort to make other people comfortable. And so to be able to say, hold on, stop the action, I'm uncomfortable, is so powerful
Okay.
because
I
it
love
forces,
that.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, because I think people are maybe scared of the N word, the no word, that word. Yes, that no can feel scary and it can feel very aggressive, maybe.
yes.
But framing it in terms of this is a me thing,
Hmm.
that I'm uncomfortable. It is really sending possibly a gentler message than just no, flat out no. And you may be saying no in a few seconds, but
There's so many ways to set boundaries and say no without having to use the word no.
okay, okay. Do tell, do share with us yeah, so what are some ways? So I love this I'm uncomfortable and in the context of a situation where you feel yourself bumping up against a boundary for you. What are some other examples of things that people could say or do when they're starting to experience this feeling or they're starting to play with noticing their own discomfort?
Absolutely. So I think one thing to be aware of is, and I know this is probably true for the both of us and most of the Outsmart Burnout listeners, but we are perfectionists and we think that once we hear something one time, we should be able to just implement it perfectly. And if we can't, there's something wrong with us. So when it
Guilty as charged.
so when it comes to setting boundaries, it's really important first to bring in some self-compassion and be kind to ourselves that we're not going to be perfect. Like you said, not only are we trying to break our own personal ingrained patterns that have been, you know, given to us by society for generations. And so it makes sense that it's a challenge. And so the first thing I tell people is you don't have to respond right away. Someone else's emergency does not have to be your emergency. If someone and I just relate to everything as a request. Even if someone says you have to do this, I'm a full-grown adult. No one gets to tell me what to do.
You are not the boss of me.
You're not the boss of me. Yes, my autonomy is very important to me as a recovering people pleaser.
Mm,
But you are allowed to give yourself space to take the time that you need to calmly and clearly think about what you want to articulate. And also, you don't need permission to ask, like, you don't have to say, oh, can I have some time to think about it? You don't have to ask permission. You can say, I need some time to think about it. I'll get back to you and let you know. And then make sure you give someone a specific day or time that you'll get back to them and get back to them so that you can do it. It's so hard to break that knee jerk reaction of just telling people what they want to hear in the moment, of that knee jerk, like, yeah, sure, okay.
sure. And then
Yeah,
you think, what did I just agree to? What did I just say yes to? Oh my
exactly.
gosh, I don't have time or space for this. And then it feels like pressure. And then it can start to build resentment.
Exactly. And none of us are as good at hiding our resentment as we think we are. Like, you can think about the last time that somebody did you a favor and you could tell they didn't want to. It's not really doing anyone any favors. So we put ourselves in these situations where we're resentful, we're trying to hide it. But the kinder thing would have just been to be upfront from the beginning of, this is going to work for me. Another thing that I tell people to do is, there are those people in our lives that it's really scary to say no to. It's really feels really high stakes.
Yeah.
Start low stakes. Start practicing with people where it's not as charged. And if they are a little, tiffed at you or they don't like it, it's not a big deal.
Mm,
I also recommend, because will so often will get out of a boundary by saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I can't. I feel so bad." And if that's true, great. But I always feel kind of icky when I say I'm sorry and I can't when I'm not really sorry and I could if I wanted.
yeah.
So what I try to do is instead of saying I'm so, because also the sorry then makes it about me. Like, I feel so bad. I am so sorry, as opposed to, addressing that it might have some impact on this other person. You really want me to attend this event and I won't be able to make it. And I can understand that might be disappointing. Instead of I'm sorry, I recommend an appreciation or an acknowledgement, thank you for the invitation, or thank you for wanting me to be there, or I appreciate, something instead of I'm sorry. And then this is a tough one for people because we there's so many golden nuggets in here, but we collapse. One of the reasons we struggle with boundaries is we collapse being direct with being mean. We think being direct is mean.
Yes.
So we won't be direct. So this is another reason why we think that people don't respect our boundaries, because we say these really ambiguous things that people then push back on. And we're like, wait, why aren't you respecting my boundaries when we weren't very direct? So instead of saying, I can't, I'll try to say, I won't. So I'll give you an example. During COVID, a family friend was doing yoga sessions online on Zoom. And I'd been on so much Zoom and I was like, no, thank you. And they had put in a chat to me and a friend, like, hey, I'm doing a Zoom class, a yoga class tonight, would love for you to be there. And I see my friend like typing and then stopping and then typing and then stopping, and she's like, I'm so sorry, I wish I could, da, da, da. And I just wrote, thanks so much for the invite, I won't be joining, but have a great session.
Yeah.
And
It's
I just and it was a low
clear.
stakes situation. It was clear. There's no, because if you say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't, da, 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 I wish I could," and then it's like, "Well, what about this? What if we did this?" And
I'll see.
I'll
I'll try to
see
make it. I'll do my best. Or like when you really mean no.
when you really mean no. And then there's this room of like, will they, won't they? And they negotiate with you, as opposed to like, and it's not rude, it's kind, it's appreciative, and it's clear. Thank you for the invitation. I won't be joining, but have a great time.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other person doesn't feel bad necessarily. They walk away and they asked, you responded, and
And they're clear.
that was the exchange of information.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah, I don't know why we struggle so hard with it. I think there's this interesting interplay of, high achieving women, perfectionism, difficulty setting boundaries, burnout, people pleasing, and how that all intersects. So, yeah, I don't know what my question is here, but how do we sort of unpack that and unravel that and start to help perfectionist people pleasers
yeah.
really shift out of that mode because how does that contribute to burnout? I mean, I think I have my answers, but would love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think part of it is getting clarity on why we people please, what we're trying to prevent. So, I know you said it was about avoiding being abandoned.
Yes.
For me, that was similar. It was, I don't want anyone to be mad at me. It's not safe when people are mad.
That
Um,
too. I think that was part of my reasoning subconsciously. I didn't even realize it.
yeah, so it goes pretty deep. I think being able to think about what's underneath this. And I also think it's challenging because a lot of these women, we do love to contribute. We are kind-hearted, we are naturally giving, we are loving, but we don't want to be taken advantage of. So I believe there's this spectrum of giving where on one side there's just total generosity, and on this other side is the overgiving and self-sacrifice. And we often have a hard time knowing when we've crossed from one to the other. And it's not this black and white thing. One day, one thing may feel generous, another day it may feel totally energy sucking. But one of the things we can start to do, and this goes back to connecting with the body, is how giving feels on each end of the spectrum is completely different. So just generous, authentic giving is, it fills us up. It makes us feel closer to people. It makes us feel enlivened and happy and excited. And then when we get into the overgiving, that's where you get the exhaustion, the depletion, the resentment, feeling used. And so I think for each of us, it's starting to ask those questions of first taking the time to not respond to people right away. And then thinking about, okay, if I were going to say yes to this, does this feel like authentic generosity? Or does this feel like I'm now putting someone's happiness and comfort at the expense of my own and really sacrifice? I think we talked about self-sacrifice, but it's really sacrificing your time, your energy, your well-being, your money, your comfort, all of that, and really starting to separate that your worth and your lovability and being a loving person is not correlated with how much you sacrifice. The other thing that was really eye opening to me, I had a coach tell me once, so I don't have any children, but if you have children and you're constantly sacrificing for your children, what you teach them is that love is self sacrifice. And then they will go off into the world finding romantic relationships where they're constantly sacrificing their needs for the other person. And it's like, wait a minute, that's not what I wanted. I want you to have an equitable, compromising relationship, not one where you think you need to sacrifice everything in order to be loved and to be worthy.
But it's so challenging because you love them so much and you don't ever wanna say no to them, and
Right.
you don't realize that, yeah, it is having an impact if you never set any boundaries with your kids and you're constantly self-sacrificing. I think it can backfire in ways that we don't even think about, but, gosh, there's so many directions to go here. I would love to talk about when we set boundaries and people don't necessarily respect them. What can we do? What are some of our options? And I think that kind of speaks to, what's the difference between a boundary or a rule or an ultimatum? And what happens when people push back or violate? And then how do we handle that?
Yeah, that's another good question. I have a lot of people ask me, like, well, I don't know if this is a boundary, if I should set a boundary. Da, da, da. So the first thing is a boundary is about, like we said before, boundaries about you. So
Yeah.
if you are trying to change someone else's behavior without their input or agreement, then you're setting a rule, which is
Right.
sometimes appropriate for children to keep them
Sure.
safe, but
Sure.
is not appropriate for adults. Unless they agree to it, but you don't usually get to set rules for adults. Boundaries are, like I said, beyond this point, I'm uncomfortable and here's what I'm going to do to take care of myself. So I think it really depends on the boundary, but if someone's doing something that really doesn't work for you, you could say, so for example, if someone gets angry with you or you're in a fight or something and they're yelling at you, you can't say, I'm not going to let you yell at me. That's a rule. You can't change if they're going to yell or not, but you can say, if you yell at me, I'm going to leave the room. And when you're ready to have a calm conversation, let me know. I'll come back. So that is one way to distinguish between a rule and a boundary. A boundary is about what you're going to do. I think a lot of the reason people don't set boundaries is because they're afraid they're actually going to have to enforce what they say if people don't follow them.
Yes.
And so your ability to set boundaries is also related to your willingness to actually step back from a relationship or someone who won't respect your boundaries. So it can be really hard with family members or things where it's like, well, I don't like what's happening, but I could never just pull myself back from this relationship, and that's where you feel stuck. So if someone doesn't respect your boundaries, I think the most important thing you can do is call it out in a obviously in a kind way. Hey, just as a reminder, I told you that if you were going to yell at me, then I wasn't going to have these conversations with you. And you've been yelling at me. And so now there's a negotiation that needs to happen. So
Yeah.
there's a lot that can happen between tolerating someone violating your boundaries and like cutting off a relationship. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's appropriate, but a lot of times it doesn't need to be. So there's also one is making sure you're going to the right people for the right things. Sometimes we have expectations that certain people in our life are able to provide certain things for us when they're not. And that can cause tension.
Yeah.
So, like I decided in my 30s that I wasn't going to talk to my family about dating until I was in a relationship with someone. And this was a big thing for me and this probably other people who deal with boundary setting can relate to. I didn't really have a distinction between secrecy and privacy. There was an expectation in my family that we just shared everything. And so to be able to
Yep.
say, yeah, to be able to say, like, actually, I'm going to keep this private until there's a significant either it's not going to work out, it doesn't matter anyway, or I'll be in a relationship with someone and you'll meet them. But I couldn't take on the emotional turmoil of my family members with my dating while I was dealing with my own issues with dating. So that was a boundary that I set of like, hey, just so you know. And they think they're sneaky. They're like, so can I ask about, the elephant in the room? Am I allowed? And I was like, when there's something for you to know, I will tell
I
you.
will tell you.
I will
I don't
tell
know if
you.
it's like a Jewish cultural thing, but I'm telling you, like the idea that I had to share everything, that I had to be absolutely, transparent and really go into deep personal things with my family. I had the same experience. And then it just ends up being just too much.
Yeah.
And you get so much input and so many voices, and there's so much pressure, and people asking,
Right.
oh,
So when I need
do
to
you have
talk
another
about
date? Like, okay, I don't want to talk about it.
right. So when I need to talk about something with a date or something in that realm, I don't go to my family. I go to a friend who I know is much more chill. So it's
Yes.
also
Yes.
making sure you're going to the right people for the right things and then figuring out what works for you. Like, okay, we can't say you're I don't know, it's hard at work, right? Because you have these hierarchical relationships. You have a boss or something. And so sometimes you're not just going to quit your job because someone isn't respecting your boundaries, but maybe you decide that you're only going to communicate with that person via email or something like that. So there's different things you can try, but
You
it
go
also
to HR.
or you go to HR, right?
This is not working. What can I
Yeah.
do?
Yeah. Every workplace should have a no jerk hiring policy. And unfortunately, they
Mm.
don't. So
So tricky.
yeah, so I think when it comes to boundaries, taking space, and a lot of times we can judge ourselves because we don't like when I first started doing this. Sometimes it would be like 2 days after something happened, and I'd be like, "Wait a minute, I didn't like that. That wasn't good." And we think we
Yeah.
should be able to just do it in the moment, and
It's a delayed
so
reaction.
yeah, total delayed reaction because a lot of times in the moment you're just trying to get through this uncomfortable. Okay, how do I not start an argument? How do I not make them mad? How do I just get
And then
through
you're
this?
triggered, and then you're in fight or flight mode, and
Exactly.
then you're flooded with cortisol, and then your frontal lobes are offline, and you're not thinking clearly, and you don't make the calm executive function decision of, I'm not comfortable.
Exactly, exactly. So I think there's a lot of and this is another skill that is really people don't really talk about it. It's really integral to boundaries is the skills of self-compassion
Mm.
because we have to be able to forgive ourselves for that delayed reaction. And you mentioned in the very like about feeling guilty when you tell people no and they don't like it and we get wrapped with this guilt. And so if you think about it, disappointment is a very natural part of life. We've all experienced it with people, whether intentionally or unintentionally. But for some reason, we think that us being the cause of it for other people is a disaster. And so there's an element of okay, I may have caused a temporary moment of discomfort for this other person. Can I forgive myself for that? Can I forgive myself? And basically, it's can I forgive myself for my own humanity? And I'll often tell myself, I did a great job being human today. I just did a
Mm.
great job being human today. Because, and sometimes we'll say things that'll disappoint or upset people and we won't even realize. And then guilt just takes us so down into the shame spiral, and we're not good and we can't do anything right. And when you can forgive yourself, like, okay, I messed up, I said the wrong thing, or I said the right thing and somebody didn't like it.
Mm.
And when you can really forgive yourself, you can really take ownership and accountability of the conversations you're having, and address them a lot more effectively than if you're coming from this place of like, I'm so sorry. I'm so full of shame. And then, how long do I have to beat myself up before I'm deserving of being happy again?
Yeah, so I love this concept of self-compassion and self-trust, which is something that you build on in your rock solid self-trust framework, which I'm curious about. And I think that an important question is how can women who start rebuilding trust with themselves if they have spent years ignoring their own needs? And I think that this ties directly into burnout beautifully. That how do we have that self compassion and then develop that self trust muscle when we have just totally ignored our own needs and been people pleasers for a long time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that a big part of it does start with self compassion. So I talk to a lot of women who say, oh, in college, there were so many things that happened that I allowed to happen that felt so. I think this is the main point is it's not about other people violating our boundaries. It's almost on some level, we allow them to be violated and then we don't trust ourselves. And so the women I talk to, they'll say, oh, in college, this happened, that happened. Like I allowed things to happen that I didn't like. But I'm better now, with boundaries and stuff, but I'm still not like, how can I trust myself? And so I think the first thing is we really have to be able to forgive those younger versions of us, that version of you in college that was, trying to be liked, trying to fit in, trying to figure out life. She did the best she could with the capacities and skills that she had. And so could be one of the other things that I often bring up is that shame and growth can't exist in the same space. So if we're shaming ourselves for the things that we've done, it keeps you stuck. We can't then take the growth opportunity from it. And so
Mm.
another piece is women will say to me, "Oh, if I just had more confidence, I could set boundaries. If I was just confident." And I have to remind them, no one's born confident. Like it's actually not a personality trait.
It's a
Es-
skill, it's a muscle.
It's a skill, exactly. And for women in this situation trying to rebuild trust, it's small, consistent actions over time that build evidence that you're going to have your own back. In terms of confidence and self trust, it's not one day you don't and one day you do. It's these small actions over time that rebuild that trust with yourself. Every time that you say, I'm uncomfortable, every time you say, I actually need some time to think about this, I'll get back to you. Every time you say, something doesn't feel right, this actually doesn't work for me. And you start to feel like you feel powerful. It's like, wow, I have this superpower where where I actually get what I need out of the situation and I'm not just at the effect of other people. I remember the first time I really struggle with people's unsolicited advice. I find that to be a huge boundary violation. Um, which I'm sure from
Guilty on both sides
yeah,
here because
exactly.
I love giving unsolicited advice, and sometimes I don't like receiving it.
Yeah, and that's another thing is the more lax we are with our own boundaries, the harder time we can have sometimes respecting other people's boundaries and take it really
Mhm.
personally when
Yeah.
people enforce their boundaries on us. And especially when we spend so much time trying to mind read and think through what's going to upset people and then they don't do the same to us and we feel really like not considered. So that's another piece of it. But I remember just the first time I was talking, maybe it was my dad or something, I was talking about something and he started giving me unsolicited advice and I was like, oh, thanks, but I'm actually good on this, I'm not looking for advice, I was just sharing whatever. And he was like, oh, okay. And I was like, wow, that was like a superpower. So it's
Well,
those
yes, it's a classic trope of, like, men immediately jump to problem solving and advice
yeah,
giving rather than just validation and listening and just, "That's
exactly.
all I really needed." And I guess sometimes it can be really hard to preface conversations with, "I wanna share this with you. I'm not looking for advice. I'm just looking for some solidarity and some
Yeah,
validation," and it can be hard to do that.
yeah. And the self compassion comes in as well. It really is important for learning any new skill because, especially as high achieving, smart, gifted women, we tend to be good at stuff and we expect ourselves to be good at stuff.
Yes.
And it can be really challenging if we're going to take on something new and it becomes this thing that's going to cause us like shame and disappointment in ourselves because we can't do it. So, being able to have that self compassion of, okay, this is a new skill. And, we tell ourselves, okay, I'm never going to let someone do XYZ again. It's like, well, of course you will. And then the other thing I tell
I'm
people
gonna
is,
get it right on the first
I'm gonna
try.
get it right. But here's the thing people miss is that your only opportunity to build skills is to notice when they're missing. So your only opportunity to actually practice setting a boundary is when you notice that a boundary is missing. If you're constantly always setting boundaries, there's nothing to practice.
Oh, this is good. This is a golden nugget right here that yes, your only opportunity to build skills is when you notice that they're missing.
Yes.
So, yes, I love this. This is incredible. If a listener walks away from this episode remembering just one thing in terms of learning that skill, practicing that skill of setting boundaries, what do you hope that that is?
What I want people to take away is that if you struggle with setting boundaries, there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. It's not some sort of defect or personality flaw. It's simply a skill set that the people who raised you and were supposed to help you learn it weren't able to because they probably didn't have it themselves. Same with self compassion. You probably didn't grow up with super self compassionate adults around you. And
Now,
so it's normal to struggle with this stuff. And it's also great news because you're a smart, capable woman and you can learn new things and you can learn this just like everything else. And even the smallest steps you take are wins to celebrate and can leave you feeling really, really proud of yourself and empowered.
so what would be a small step or a win that we could all try taking today?
Small step or a win. I think that first thing I mentioned, where if somebody asks you something, don't give a yes or no right away.
Mm,
And you could even say, even if it sounds silly, like, I'm practicing not responding to requests right away. So
huh.
I'm going to take some time to think about it and I'll get back to you tomorrow. But yeah, just taking ownership of your time and your timeline for getting back to people can be a big step in
Yeah,
saying,
I definitely try to help women with that, that you are not obligated to say yes or no right away. You are allowed to say because especially if you feel guilty when you say no. And so you're just
exactly.
gonna knee jerk say yes.
Yeah.
So you have the right to say, "I'm gonna think about it. I'm gonna take some time," and you can then formulate your response and think about that decision and think about whether you have the bandwidth and whether you actually truly want to do this thing. And I think that that's sort of at the crux of I think a lot of all of this when it comes to burnout, when it comes to boundaries, when it comes to self-compassion, when it comes to self-trust is you have to really truly know yourself. And it's not as easy as it sounds. And it's something that requires time and effort and depth and really truly figuring out what it is that you want out of your one wild and precious life. It's not that easy. And for me, it starts with something like what ice cream flavor am I going to get? Or like
Yeah.
what am I going to order in the restaurant because I used to like get so stressed about this and pick the wrong thing because I was just coming up with all kinds of reasons and excuses to pick this or pick that or what do I want? Not what do other people want, not what do other people think, not what are other people judging me for, this or that. What do I want? And I think that, yeah, if we start somewhere really small, like ordering in a restaurant,
Yeah. Or like, what am I going to wear today?
what am I going to wear today? Yeah. And these are really simple decisions, but they can trip you up if you're constantly worrying about other people and pleasing others and, being liked and all of those things. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think this is so amazing. And so, oh my gosh, I could talk to you all day because we have so much in common, so much synergy. This has been an incredible
It's been
conversation.
so fun. I could talk
I have
about it for hours.
I have loved every minute of it. And so I think that people who are listening are probably going to just be in love with this conversation as well. And maybe it's lit a fire in you. Maybe you're ready to stop people pleasing and start trusting yourself on a whole new level. So I want folks to know how they can connect with you. I know that you have a free download on your website, right? About when to
Yeah.
set boundaries.
Yeah, so so my website is mollyruben.com. That's MOLLYRUBEN.com. And I have a free download. It's called the Boundary Clarity Guide, 5 questions to help you learn when to speak up, set a limit, and say no. So if you're
Oh,
somebody who struggles with when do I set a boundary? Is it okay to set a boundary? Is it appropriate to set a boundary? This clarity guide will give you some additional background on why we tend to overgive and people please, and then give you those questions to start thinking about so you can decide on when to set a boundary. And also on my website, there's an opportunity to schedule a free one on one coaching consult if you want to connect with me on a deeper level.
fantastic. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So, yeah, definitely connect with Molly. I think that this is such an important topic. And I think, yeah, I'm going to head over to the website. I'm going to download this guide myself because we can always improve on setting boundaries. And I think it's really has the potential to have this domino effect and really benefit other areas of our lives. So, thank you so much. So, if this episode spoke to you, don't forget to subscribe, share it with a friend, or leave us a review. It really does help the show reach more women who are ready to outsmart burnout. And until next time, remember, burnout isn't your destiny, it's your wake up call.